say so. Alright, so Lewis Hamilton has won the British Grand Prix. Hate him or love him, the guy's statistically one of the best drivers to ever do it. Especially being cheered on by his home fans. Thousands upon thousands were there at the racetrack today. It's actually pretty awesome to see him and hear the crowd cheer as he goes past. I mean, the atmosphere all weekend has been amazing. Fans cheering, sprint qualifying, drama on the first lap. Yeah, well done, Baku. Just kidding. So let's get into it. Lewis was ultimately given a penalty for his contact with Max on the first lap. It was deemed to be a 10-second penalty. And isn't it excruciating watching a driver sit there for 10 seconds in the pit box? It just seems like it takes forever. It reminds me of like Paul Pogba doing a run-up to take his own penalties. Lewis was also issued 2 points to his super license, bringing him to a total of 4. So I think you need, 12 to be suspended for a race, so there's no near consequence of him being expelled for a race anytime soon. In the statement given by the stewards for the reason of the penalty, they state that car 33 and car 34 entered turn 9 with car 33 in the lead and car 34 slightly behind on the inside. Car 44 was on a line that did not reach the apex of the corner with room available on the inside. When car 33 turned into the corner, car 44 did not avoid contact and the left front of car 44 contacted the right rear end of car 33. Car 44 is judged predominantly at fault. And then it goes on to state competitors are reminded they can appeal, yada yada yada. So obviously the stewards deemed Hamilton at fault. They felt that he didn't leave enough room for Verstappen. They felt that they could have done more to avoid contact with Verstappen. But I want to understand what the both sides of the argument are. Online, there's a lot of people saying, oh, it's just a racing incident, or the other side saying, oh, it's a penalty. You have people saying Hamilton shouldn't have done this. You have people saying Verstappen shouldn't have done that. So let's try to understand both sides here. So let's start with the perspective that it was a racing incident. That's what I see a lot of pundits, a lot of ex-racing drivers saying, yeah, racing incident. And you can see why they think that. Lewis and Max are racing for the lead. They're racing for a championship. They're two drivers at their prime battling on track to see who's the better driver and who's the better team. That's exactly what we've wanted in Formula One for so long. It hasn't been since, 2016 since we've seen an actual valid title fight. Yeah, we had one, 2018 with Vettel and Hamilton, but Ferrari kind of self-imploded there. So this is actually the first year since Rosberg that we actually have a title fight where it seems, Mercedes might not win every race. So of course we want to see the racing, especially for the lead. It's fine seeing overtakes and good racing in the midfield, but it's kind of pointless if we already know it's going to be a Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas pole. Unless George Russell scores his first points, then that'll be something completely different. I'm seeing the argument that fans are making that Max should expect Lewis to run a little bit wide in the corner, therefore he shouldn't turn in on him. And you can see that Max 100% did. He left Lewis more than enough space that Lewis was able to make the corner and be well wide. Well, not well wide, but be wide off where the typical apex would be. Because you have to remember, both drivers know that the tires are cold, brakes are getting up to temperature, the car is full of fuel, and they're still trying to figure out the balance of the car on that set of tires. So you would think they'd be a little bit more cautious in the first lap. You saw from the sprint race, he was stuck behind Verstappen for the entire 17 laps. Verstappen got the jump on him at the start, and then basically he just had to follow him because we all know the problem in Formula One. You can't follow another car in their turbulent wake without destroying your tires. So my rational side would say, Hamilton had 51 laps, another 918 possible corners to attempt to move again. Why did he have to attempt it then? But then the racer side goes back to that famous Senna quote, when you no longer go for the gap, you no longer are a racing driver. And that's a fair point. Yeah, it's racing. You do have to go for it. No quarter asked, no quarter given. Even Christian Horner earlier this year used that statement or that sentiment to defend his driver's actions on track. So what's the difference? The difference is Hamilton woke up and chose absolute violence. Alright, he was not having it. Red Bull just won 5 races in a row. England lost the Euros and it rained during the Miami Bikini Fashion Week. He's not having it, people. Alright, he's going to show Verstappen that he's a 7-time world championship and he demands respect on the track. Especially after what happened in Imola when Max kind of booted him or bumped him off the track in turn 1. So Lewis definitely had to show that he's not willing to concede the position on track anymore. And I think he sent the point. Maybe a bit exaggerated, but definitely Max is going to be thinking about that the next time he goes side by side into a corner with Lewis. Yeah, I completely understand the argument that it's a racing incident. That's what you want. You can't penalize drivers for trying to make an overtake. But at what point do we say that that's too far? At what point do we say, oh, that's excessive? Is it only when a car gets absolutely totaled, thus costing the team, what, a couple $1 million, an engine, possibly going to have to take a penalty down later in the year for an engine change? So let's go on to the second argument. It's a clear Stonewall penalty. And by the letter of the law, I have to agree, it is. This comes back to Austria when there was a ridiculous amount of penalties given out. Even I was like, all right, this might be a little bit excessive. There is this like, you get a penalty, you get a penalty, you get a penalty. I mean, no one likes to be given penalties, but the rule book is the rule book. But the problem with how the rule book is written is it leaves wiggle room for subjective interpretations to the rules to be made instead of objective interpretations to be made. So what do we learn in Austria? Well, in summary, we learned that drivers must leave a car's width of space to allow other drivers to attempt an overtaking maneuver, and drivers are ultimately responsible for avoiding collisions, obviously. Seemed very simple, but apparently we just went haywire in Austria with it. As I understand, the lead car has the right to dictate the racing line, and Max was 100% ahead of Lewis the entire time before he got taken out. Therefore, it was Verstappen's prerogative to decide how to navigate the racing line through turn 9. Ooh, that kind of rhyme. Racing line through turn 9. Racing line to turn 9. Alright, let me stop. Through cops. Yes, Lewis got alongside him, but he was never ahead of him. Therefore, as long as Max didn't make any rash dives across the track, it was Lewis' responsibility to avoid contact with Max while he dictated the racing line. At this point, people would say that Max turned into Lewis. To that, the race footage clearly shows that Max is ahead, and at the point of turning in, Lewis had more than a car's width of space on the apex to give Max space to make that turn. Max had every right to turn in when he did, especially since there were more than a car's width of space on the inside for Lewis. He is the lead car, he has the right to dictate the line through the corner. Therefore, even though Lewis on the inside, the corner is still Max's. I mean, look what happened to Leclerc and Hamilton. Leclerc was ahead, but he was so focused on making sure he gave enough space that he gave too much space, ran out into the marbles, ran wide, and then Lewis just had an easy overtake. So this goes down to the argument that Lewis has been making. He had the inside line, therefore the corner is his. But in 2016, there was a similar incident with Lewis and Rosberg, where Lewis was outside and ahead of Rosberg, I think, into turn 3, and Rosberg absolutely dive bombed up the inside of Hamilton, and Hamilton had to make the corner, so eventually he had to turn in, and they made contact. Now, when you look at that race footage, you could clearly see Rosberg was 100% total, just sending it up the inside, and was way off the apex of the corner. But after the race, Lewis kept making the argument that he was the driver ahead, and eventually you expect him to turn in, therefore contact would be made. So what's different with that today? Max was on the outside, he was ahead. You do have to expect him to turn in eventually, don't you? And I guess it's a bit exaggerated because Austria, it was turn 3, the corner is what, like a 40-mile-an-hour corner, where at Copse and Silverstone, it's 170 miles an hour, so finer, more minute movements have a greater consequence. And in that situation, Rosberg was given a penalty and you didn't hear anyone crying about it. It's just at high speeds, it's harder to differentiate what a driver is willfully doing versus what is just a subsequence of the physical forces acting upon the car.